So back in the 90s, AIDS service organizations were really desperate for funding. They really needed to figure out how they were going to fund all the life-saving programs, how they were going to help people in the community, especially those that couldn't afford healthcare or couldn't afford services. So the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and the Los Angeles LGBT Center got together at the time, and they had this wild idea to have people do something extraordinary.
Hello, riders! Here we go! Good morning, riders. Welcome to Rest Stop 1.
AIDS LifeCycle is a 7-day cycling event that goes from San Francisco
Day 1.
I'm ready to go all the way to LA, baby.
to Los Angeles each June for the past 30 plus years. It is comprised of about 2,500 cyclists, another 700 to 800 folks who join us as volunteers.
What is the lifeblood of this ride?
We raise money for the HIV and AIDS programs and services of the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and the Los Angeles LGBT Center.
We're so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
It's fun and it's hard and it's long and it goes by also unbelievably fast. And along the route there is surprise and delight kind of at every turn. Each day kind of has its own emotional arc. It really is like, it's magical.
I've been around the race now for a couple of years, and right from the get-go, learning about its history was really important to me. But you learn it through the eyes of people who've been doing it for a while. So before I ask you about how long you've been doing it and why you started, did any of you have any cycling experience before you got involved with AIDS LifeCycle?
No, I did not.
At all?
Not as a school kid.
When was the
But
last time
until
you've been
then.
on a bike?
Before the ride?
Yeah.
It had been a good 10 years.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So, Pepe, you actually do have experience as a cyclist. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background?
All right. Well, I joined the Navy straight out of high school. Got stationed in Spain, and one of my shipmates there was a cyclist, so he got me into cycling. So I bought my first road bike in Spain, and I would ride in the rolling hills of Andalusia.
That sounds amazing.
And then when I came back to the States, I did a 50-mile bike ride in Ventura, Port Hueneme, where we ride through. I was stationed there. So on day 7, when we leave Ventura and we go to LA, we ride past my base that I was stationed at for a long time. So it's a real special day for me. And that same bike that I rode in Spain, that bike had been around the world.
I actually used to ride a lot, but I've never ridden on the ride.
Okay. And Ferd, had you ridden before?
No. My last bike was one of those bikes where you pedaled backwards to stop. And that was in
Exactly.
junior high and high school.
Did I see you on that bike last year on the ride? I was so impressed.
Make good
So
skid
impressed.
marks.
So no ride experience.
What is the AIDS life cycle to you?
It defined my life. It gave my life a sense of purpose. So I was actually on a dinner date, and this individual said, "Have you heard of this thing called the California AIDS Ride?" And I said, "No, what is it?" And back then we had brochures, so we actually had a little brochure. I started reading it and I started crying, and I said, this is something I needed to do. I felt that if I was going to be a gay man, that HIV was going to affect me personally. So that night I decided I'm going to do the ride, and that was back in 1998.
1997. Princess Diana died. I was in San Francisco at the time. And I remember thinking, here's somebody that gave back so much. I've done nothing. I have a great life, and I've done nothing to give back for it. And that was the impetus. That's what pushed me. I was sitting at work. I work at UPS, and it was one of those moments where it is that fork in the road that changes your life. And I was a happy little straight girl as far as I knew. And I mean, I worked at UPS and I'm 5'10", go figure. But anyway, I didn't know anybody. It was not something that I did. It was definitely out of my comfort zone to do something like this that I knew nobody. And so I signed up.
I was originally from New York as well. I was a member of the gay men's chorus in New York, so I would come down every week for rehearsals. Then I moved into Manhattan, which was a smarter deal than 2-hour commute. And this was in the early 90s. And all we were doing back then when I joined the chorus was singing at memorial services. It was really tough. A lot of our membership was just dying. Then I moved to California, and I knew I still had to be involved. I was hired at the AIDS Foundation into the development department, and the ride was the first thing I was kind of assigned to. So the first year I couldn't ride because I'd come on too late, but I went down for closing ceremonies and was blown away when I saw these riders coming down the Century City then, coming over the hill, and the roadies coming in, and I knew I had to be part of that. I was actually a client of the AIDS Foundation for a time, and I know how important the money is because I was on that other side of it. So everything I'm doing is helping the person that I used to be in that same position now. I know it has changed people's lives. I consistently am a top fundraiser. I really pride myself in that. I've just now passed my $340,000 total for LifeCycle the years I've been doing it. This year I'm about $24,000 right now. So I'm really excited for that. Right before the AIDS ride that I rode, that I was HIV positive. That was the first time I found out in 2000. And it made the reason of why I was doing the ride 10 times more important. I'm still doing it for my friends, obviously, but I had to prove to myself I could still do something like this back then. So that's what brought me where I am today.
You know, when I was in the military, I would donate money to the CFC, Combined Federal Campaign, to give money towards AIDS. And when I retired out of the military, I would do the AIDS walk with my mother. And then 2012 was my first ride. So I've been doing the ride ever since.
Well, and more than just the ride, right?
Yeah.
Over a dozen years later, you're now more involved with this community, and this is your community.
The reason I ride is for my brother.
What was his name?
Gerardo.
Tell me about him.
So, Gerardo was the most gentle giant. He had my back. His older brother kept me out of trouble growing up in the streets of San Francisco in the Mission District. And then I was getting stationed in Greece. That's when he came out. But he didn't just come out to the family. He came out and said, I have HIV. I'm dying of AIDS. And so I said, what can I do for you? How can I help you? I'm overseas. I'm not home. And he said, don't worry about me. I'm fine. Help somebody else. He went in and out of the hospital 13 times in 2 years. And I was never home. I never once saw him in the hospital. I was never there for him. My brother died. Flew back home to bury him. And that's been my mission ever since, is to help somebody else.
Pepe, when did you first get involved with AIDS LifeCycle?
That was November of 2011. And I did my very first training ride out of the Orinda bike rides with Mary V and Edna were my training ride leaders. Last year, somebody approached me to be on the board, San Francisco AIDS Foundation. And then I heard that this was the last year of the ride, and I figured, well, this is how I can continue my mission, continue to give back, to continue to be part of the community, is by stepping up and being on the board. It's been an amazing journey.
You know, I remember the first time I heard somebody say, I'm living with HIV. And Paul Wachowski, the board chair at the time, came up on stage and he said, my name is Paul Wachowski and I'm living with HIV. And he began to share his story. And I literally just started crying. Because at the time, I was just, again, trying to figure out my sexuality. And I thought if you were HIV positive, you were dying or you were already dead. It just really changed my paradigm as far as what it meant. And every day I would look for him to make sure that he was doing okay, but I did not have the courage, to say hi to him. The fact that there was no stigma, there was no shame, You know, the reason why that was so important to me, because in 2002, I tested positive. That very first ride, I remember putting that flag, the positive peddler's flag. It was such a big step for me because for the first 4 or 5 years, I didn't have a flag on my bike. But that very first ride, ALC2, I put that flag on my bike.
It is so inspiring when you are seeing this group. They've been around a long time. John Pond was around for a long time, and we still do a ride in his memory. I joined Paz Peds that same year, and you're right, I flew my flag, and the first time I had my flag on my bike, the riders go by you, and everyone is just, go Paz Peds, we love you, and everyone's touching you, reaching out.
This November would be my 23 years of living with HIV. I grew up on this ride. I learned to be an activist on this ride. And yeah, it gave my life a sense of purpose, so.
Exactly what you said. I had found my purpose there and what I was doing. I wasn't ashamed of being HIV positive. I would speak out about it at that point. The Paz Peds are a great force of nature. And when you see those flags, you used to be able to, going down the road, this army of orange flags just waving in the wind.
You hear the noise.
Yeah. It was, I hate to say magical, but it was. You would see this and be like, oh my God. And everyone was so supportive. So the Paz Peds have done so much to make the ride what it is today.
Day when the ride was first starting, everybody knew somebody that either had HIV, had died from AIDS. There was a number of people on the ride that were positive. This was like a real challenge to show the world that even though you had HIV, you could still do this ride, you could still do this challenge. And out of that grew this amazing organization, the Positive Peddlers. And a lot of people, you know, back then didn't want to tell everybody about, you know, their HIV status because it was still stigmatized. But, you know, the ride was a place where people would feel really comfortable to do that. So I think in today's generation, you know, sometimes people don't remember what it was like. You know, the ride is here for community, but that original fight was really personal to people. It really had something to do with the people I knew that were infected or the people that I knew that had passed away. And a lot of the long-term survivors are out on their own, and several of them are still doing this ride 30 years later, which is an amazing testament to what's going on. And I encourage everyone to get to know people across generations about finding out about why you do the ride now and why someone originally did the ride and what makes it important to them.